Okay. So, yeah, I don't want to be that professor to always remind to turn on the cameras, but in small groups, I think it will be extra helpful. Thanks for turning it on, Yuhan. Okay, we can start. So first, here's the difference between workshops and courses. I know some students were asking me about it yesterday. So courses, you could assume it's more similar to yesterday's format, where it's mostly presentation and small times for Q&A, while workshops are a lot shorter presentations, usually like 20 minutes-ish, and the majority of time is for you to ask questions or to actively work on something with the coaches, whether that's like share screen and follow along or live feedback. So we'll be setting up the breakout rooms later for you all to go into your small groups to work with your coach. So the first thing we need to talk about today is a little bit about how a recruiter views your resume, what your resume sort of like needs to hit to satisfy them. So the first question I want to throw out, everyone can just type in chat really quickly. Does everyone have at least one version of their resume? Does anyone not have a resume currently? So let me read the chat. So I assume everyone has one version of resume. Okay, that's perfect. So the first thing I want everyone to do right now, and again, we're a very like open environment, so please don't feel like you're a little bit stressed to share your work. But in today's live courses, you should see a thread called "Share Your Resume" here. Please try to reply to that thread directly, and then just add your resume in that thread. If you need to block out any sensitive information, you can, but usually it's fine because you shouldn't put your address on your resume anyways. So anything you put on your resume, it should be for public view because you should ideally be adding it on your LinkedIn or your website. So just share your resume in that thread. I know you all might have shared it in the channel, but in the live courses thread, all of you should be able to see your resume to a thread to do that. So just upload your resumes as we start our class.
And to clarify, which channel are they throwing it into?
It's in live courses.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep. Is everyone able to find that channel? Okay. Yeah, so you all should be in that channel. So just add your resumes to that class. That'll be a great place later on in the workshop for coaches to look at your resume. And so just make sure you do that right now. As you do that, we'll be starting out our courses. So, and please, if any of you need help with any of the Slack stuff or can't find anything, just message chat. We have Shanri, Qingya, and Xinye helping you all. So I appreciate the three of you joining me on a Saturday.
It's a Sunday.
It's a Sunday, yes. Joining me on a Sunday. It's been a long week for me. Okay, awesome. I see Yuhan and Eva already posted. So yes, please share your resumes in that channel. Okay, I see a lot more coming in. That's awesome. Perfect. Okay, so coaches, later on in the breakout room, if students like want feedback on their resume, that's a great place for you all to dig for it. So going into our course today, let me start up my share screen. So the first thing we need to talk a little bit about resume is what is a good resume and what isn't, right? So a lot of you have shared your resumes in the portfolio and resume channel. So if you all scroll back and read each other's comments, like one of the top things we talk about, let's see if we talk about it here, is who is viewing your resume. I can't remember which feedbacks we talked about those, which feedbacks we didn't, but it's always a good place to look at other people's work and the feedbacks we gave. So right off of the top of your head, if you all were to type who might be some people that would look at your resume, Just participate in chat. Who do you think might be some folks that would look at your resume? Of course, no right or wrong answers. I mean, there are actually right or wrong answers, but feel free to share it. So let's see if your assumptions are right. So give examples of who you think would look at your resume potentially. Okay, so we got a few in. Recruiter, hiring manager, staffing agency, manager. Okay, so that's really good. Recruiters and hiring managers will be the majority of folks looking at your resume. That is very true. One area I will highlight just so people know is there is a lot of companies that do use a CTS scanning, which is what we call like machine reading, right? So if you see comments like on, oh, this isn't scannable, this isn't readable, that's what we refer to. So remember the three categories of people looking at your resume will be machine, recruiter, and design manager. And think of it in that order because companies that use a machine scanner, the machine scans it first, right? And then the recruiter looks at it. And then if the recruiter likes it too, then the hiring manager looks at it. When you all like progress in your career, it's going to change a lot. So everything I'm talking about is mostly for internships and new grads. And the reason why is very obvious, right? When you're applying for a new grad or intern role, I'll give you all some numbers. Like hopefully it doesn't like stress anyone out. But for let's say big tech role at Google or Amazon, when they open it up for let's say their wave in January, right, which is usually close to the last wave. The applicants they get for every role, at least when I was, on the interviewing side, so later on in my career, and I'm looking at how they do the interviews, usually there are close to 10,000 applicants for each wave. So there's a lot of, like probably more than you imagine, of applicants. So even for a large company like Amazon, where they have such a big recruiting team, it's impossible for them to filter through all that. So they use, I'm not sure if they still do for currently and future years, but with their student portal, a lot of companies that use a portal setup, such as Meta has theirs, I believe Google has theirs too. The portal is a way where they can use different ways to filter out a lot of candidates. And then the easiest way they do that is with your resume, because there's no easy way for them to filter candidates off on portfolio. So that's why the first level of content you need to provide is you have to at least beat the filtering system, right? If your resume keeps getting filtering out, then of course you're not going to get any offers. So you may have the best experiences out there, but your keywords may be missing, the way you write your resume may not be scannable, right? All those will become problems. So if your resume looks anything like these two with the little X's, so you see this one here, these are all generally pretty bad, okay? This first one here is really bad because this is pretty bad for scannability. And an easy way, so I have a CTS software, so I can like actually test the way like most companies test. But an easy way you can figure out if your resume is scannable or not is a lot of LinkedIn postings or job postings, if you all have applied. When you upload your resume, it says like write your work experience, right? And then it asks you to input your resume. And then if you input your resume and then it auto fills the work experience, but the work experience is like all messed up, then it means your resume isn't too scannable, right? Because the LinkedIn way of doing it is very similar to how a company would do it. So that's a very easy way for you all to test without using any software. Another way to test is, this is also a very easy way to test how scannable it is. So let me see if I can pull this up for you all. See if it exports. Okay. So hopefully you all can see my screen. So another way you can see how scannable it is you export it as a PDF and then you drag your mouse down like this, and then you see the way it selects, right? This isn't as accurate as the LinkedIn way, but this is a quick way for you to see, like, if you can't really select the text smoothly, then generally it means the scannability might be bad. So this one, obviously the scannability is like pretty terrible because the way the text is broken up, it's, like I'll just say it's not ideal. So if your resume looks anything like that, that's a big red flag just off the bat. So any questions on this portion, please type in chat. Let me know if anything I said doesn't make sense. Okay, so the structure, scannability, I think all of that makes sense. I think it's mostly public knowledge at this point, so just make sure you do it correctly. So if you look at this one seems a little bit less designy, but this one will be a lot better scannable, right? So when you design your resume, when you create your resume, always remember the number one thing you need to do is to make sure the right people see it. And your resume isn't meant to be something that's super creative or like very unique, right? Your resume is meant to be generic-ish looking. Like you can add some design elements to it, but the resume's whole point is just to show your basic qualifications, so people are like, okay, you're qualified enough that I'm gonna click on your portfolio, or I'm gonna give you an interview so I actually get to know who you are and what your like flavors are, so to say. Okay, quick question: does one column resume has better standing than a two column resume? So this, you can consider this sort of as two column. So that's not gonna be too big of an issue. Usually, like when you break up the text by chunk, it should be too bad. So just test it out on LinkedIn or with the method I just showed if you need to. And usually, like for larger companies with portals, they ask you to input the work experience right into their portal. A lot of companies do that. I believe for most entry level and intern roles, not too many allow you to only share your resume without typing in the actual experiences. So even though it's super annoying every time you fill out a new role, like you have to fill out the experience again, but make sure you do that step like properly and correctly. And don't be lazy on that, because when they do that, they'll scan using the information input rather than your resume. So that's, a lot of companies do that just to avoid like students making the mistake of making their resume super unscannable. So another like extension of this CFA based on your question is, let's say your resume does fine with the machine and now a recruiter is looking at it. So the recruiter, you should think of it as a mix between the hiring manager and the machine. So the machine obviously doesn't know anything, right? The machine's just they're just looking for specific words. I'll talk a little bit more about like what words you need to put on a resume and things like that. But the recruiter is a real human, so the recruiter is a little bit different from the machine and the hiring manager. So following our story, let's say out of 10,000 people, now like 90% or 99% have been filtered out. It's probably closer to 90. So now let's say 1,000 people are looking at your resume and they're all the recruiting team. So these are now real people, right? But the way the recruiters are going to look at your resume is a little bit more similar to the machine than I would say the hiring manager. Because the way the recruiter is going to read through your experience is the recruiters are mainly scanning for title, right? And they're just scanning for keywords in your content. So what do I mean by this, right? The recruiter isn't a UX designer. So you could write something in here that says like, you made this most amazing product, blah, 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 blah. The recruiter is not going to care, first of all. And the recruiter might not even understand like what you're talking about, right? So you might say something like, I created micro interactions on, some VR, AR thing, blah, blah, blah. But when the recruiter reads that, that may not fit the job description, even though like the project itself may be super awesome. And like, if you showed it to Apple would be like, I will hire you today. But just by reading the text itself, recruiter is not going to care about that kind of stuff. So when you write your work experience, if you all look at some of the student examples in the portfolio resume or what you shared today, you'll realize a lot of students make this mistake, right? They write their resume chunk as a little story, right, with full punctuation and everything. So that's why a lot of unexperienced like coaches, they just tell people to do it in bullet points. You don't have to do your resume in bullet points, but you need to understand the reason why people say that, right? It's because you don't want to write a full little story in your paragraph. It should be like concrete things you've done. We'll look at some like coach examples and student examples later on, right? So think about that. So if the recruiter reads your bio, everything looks good, then you move on to the hiring manager. So this is the guy that actually knows UX, right? Hopefully that, like they're a UX manager. Sometimes, for companies, like it's a product manager or like a dev manager, like they might come from like engineering background. But this person at least knows what a UX designer should do, or at least they know what they want the UX designer to do because they're the one doing the hiring. For internship roles, it's a little bit different because a lot of internship roles like Amazon, they do like student programs. So it's like you're not being matched with the manager specifically. You're more just hitting a generic bar, right? So some of them don't even have this last step, right? But if you're hired doing a new grad role, there of course is the last step because you're interviewing for a specific role. So now the manager generally just looks at about 50 resumes, right? And the way the manager is going to look at your resume, so I've talked with a lot of managers, my own in the past and whatnot. The way the manager is going to look at the resume, they're just going to do it for fun. So they're not going to set dedicated time to review everyone's like resume in depth. The way they're going to do it is whenever they're bored from work, they're looking at your resume, right? So that's why we talk a lot about things like hyperlinking your work in your resume, right? It's a very, very small detail, but you'll notice when you hyperlink your work, let's say you haven't worked at any big name companies, you did like a startup project or a smaller project. When you hyperlink your work, when the person's looking at it for fun and they read it and they're like, oh, this is kind of cool, they can click on it and it pops up, right? The alternative is if you expect them to search up what project you did or what company you worked at, that's never going to happen, right? Doesn't matter how interesting your description is. So just think about all those things, right? It's like you're looking at TikTok, right? If your content isn't immediately digestible and attractive on the short term, it's not going to work for all three levels, because even at the final level where the person is clicking on your portfolio, is clicking on your links, you need to make it accessible to them, right? You need to make the whole process as easy as possible every step of the way. So that's how you want to think about your resume in the UX world. Do not think about your resume as stuff like, okay, like this one has so many wrong with it. Like I'll just quickly go from top to bottom. I don't think any of you made these mistakes. Like first off, you should never include your picture because a lot of companies will instantly just disqualify you if you do this. Don't divide your resume up like artificially with such a big black block. These two all suffer from this. Is just small visual feedback. Other than that, like this part, experience education is fine. Generally, languages you don't need to have unless you're applying for like an international role or like the company specifically says like Spanish is preferred. Then you should put your language. Modo, like those kind of stuff, definitely don't include. Think about like this, your resume is very precious real estate. The space is limited because it has to be a one-pager. So think about how you want to use up this space, right? How can you use up the space to make sure the machine reads it well, recruiter reads it well, the manager reads it well, right? So let's look at some essentials to have. You need your contact info, right? Everyone should have this. Location, very optional nowadays because most roles are fully remote. Education, this is highlighted in red because this is only important for when you are a new grad or looking for an internship role. Title related experience, this is basically the meat of your resume. So when you're a student, the education also matters a lot because that's a big qualification. But the title and related experience is where you should dedicate all of your, or most of your real estate on. Skill set is also important because the skill set is a way you can hit a lot of those key terms for free. Other work experience, this one's a bit tricky. So if you have like leadership stuff for like different schools, I'll show a few student examples later. It is valuable to have at times, right? So you can think of it like if it's a flex, right? You can include it. It's like when you, if your GPA is like 4.0 or 3.9, like sure, you can include it on your resume. If your GPA is like mine, which was very bad when I was a student, like definitely don't include it on your resume, right? So just remember title and education on the core sections for you all. One thing all of you after today or in the workshops you all should do is the experience needed for every company kind of changes year from year. Like UX is evolving, right? UX research is now being put a lot more emphasis than before. Data driven, those things. Like every company, of course, is a little bit different from the other companies. So I recommend you all go on LinkedIn or go on Indeed, like look at 5 to 10 of your favorite companies or companies that are actively hiring, and then just copy out their responsibilities, right? Like what you need to do. So don't copy the role description, right? Because the role description is just company like propaganda. It's like just junk. Like, you should never write your resume based off the role description, right? But what you will need to do, that is the stuff you should copy, the qualification responsibilities. These are things you should copy out and write your resume based off of those things. So the easiest way to know what to write is just read at what they're looking for, right? And the way they're going to set up their scanning and the way the recruiters evaluate you is all based on these things they put up. So let's look at a few examples. So the way you can follow up that step I said is what you'll need to do is copy out these things, highlight the terms, rewrite your resumes, and then if your resumes have anything like structurally flawed, then of course that's the first step you should change. So before we break up into little breakup groups with our 3 coaches, we should have, I know we have a few students today, but we should be able to do around 6 per room. I have to drop for another call, but you all are in good hands, and I hope what I said makes a lot of sense. I'll do quick questions first before I drop. But let's look at, this is Hannah. Hannah's one of our past coaches. So look at her resume when so this is not updated. This is like from quite a while back. So when you're applying for new grad or internship roles, keep the graduation date, right? Generally, like this is a little secret tip. Like if you graduated already, but let's say the role needs you to still be a student, you can kind of, work around that by changing up the dates or like the month a little bit, just so you can pass the initial screening. But later on, when you actually talk face to face, in an interview, you should make it clear that you've actually graduated, because later on in the background checks, the manager will eventually know the truth anyways. So in your resume, if you need to change some details just to get the interview, like definitely go for it. I'm all for that. Be smart, right? But there's a time to be honest later on down the road. This other stuff though, generally you need to be pretty honest. The experience itself, there's a lot of freedom on how you write it, right? So let's say you've never done research in that role, but the company you're applying for does ask for a lot of research, but for a fact you understand how to do UX research, right? Then you can of course write that into your experience, even if you really didn't do it for the role. And the reason is because if you really feel confident enough that you can do it, then just write it like that, right? And then later on in your interviews, then you need to kind of explain, right? So just think of it like that. The titles, so if let's say you're working at a real legit company, there's no real leeway to changing the title. So keep the title the way it is. But let's say if you are a school project or an older project where it's not really from a company, there's leeway on changing the title. So make the title match the role you're applying to. And these things on the side, these should just reflect whatever the company is looking for. So you can kind of switch them out depending on the role you're applying to. On my side here, I have my resume somewhat updated. So this is from early 2022. When you're a lot more senior, don't include your graduation and stuff like that anymore. In my most up-to-date resume, I don't even have my education anymore, just so I can make more room for work experiences. So your resume is going to be something that evolves all the time, like generally updated every year. But for now, this sort of level is what all of you should aim for, right? So work experience-wise, what would you say, like if I don't have, that many experiences? You should at least have 3 really solid ones. So 2 is too little. 4, like if you have more, that's better. But if let's say you put 4, but one of them is somewhat not competitive, just take out the not too competitive one and have 3 really strong ones, right? So if you have 3 really strong ones, then you have more room to write descriptions for all of it. Any questions before we wrap up and go into breakout rooms? And then if anyone needs one of these templates to work off of, I'll share a Figma file with you. So I think these two templates are the only ones you need to reference. But it sounds like most of you already have one version of your resume. Whether you're working on like Illustrator, InDesign, or Figma, all of that is fine. But yeah, just make sure that you're somewhat happy with your layout first. So any questions before we go into breakout rooms? You can type them in the chat or just shout them out. Okay, last call. Okay, share resume template. Okay, Manish, I'll share that in the live courses in just a bit. Okay, any questions? I know that was some dense information perhaps. Did all of you feel like you learned something new, or did all of you already knew everything I said? Curious to hear that as well. Any thoughts, feedback? Okay, we're gonna open the breakout rooms then. Yeah, please, if any feedback ever comes up on what I'm teaching or any questions, definitely ask me later as well. So, Shanri, I believe you're still here, right? I'll open a breakout room for you too. Okay, so we'll start the rooms. Looks like we have about 16 participants. So please just divide up the rooms amongst yourselves. All of you should be able to join now, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's get it.
Yeah. And I think Xingye and I have saw a few like resume before in our channel. So I think if you could please join the one like the coach didn't see you resumes, I think that will help more.
Awesome. Yeah. So please go amongst your rooms.
Hello.
Hello.
So I'm just going to wait a little bit. It seems like people did not file into evenly distributed rooms.
I think it's because Qingyan said go to the ones where you didn't leave comments, and then I'm pretty sure you left comments on everyone's.
That might have been it. Well,
not mine.
Yeah. Let's see. Did you post yours in the live courses channel?
Yeah.
Yet?
But I can.
I think. Let me see.
It should be in the portfolio resume channel,
Okay.
but can I post it here?
Oh, I see it now.
Maybe
We'll find it there. Okay.
Yeah, and you've already got your questions. Let me go ahead and share screen. Oh, yeah. Can you enable screen sharing, Leon?
Yeah, let me do that. Actually, I probably have to drop, so let me make you a host.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, you can try sharing your screen first.
Yep, y'all should be able to see that now. Great. So, I'm just going to first read through some of the questions. Is it advisable to remove dev experience while applying for design roles? Do the points speak to skill set? Is it too technical? What kind of roles does it lean towards? Okay. And let's see. Okay. So what I'm going to do is sort of just, I haven't really looked at it yet, so I'll kind of talk through pretty much as fast as I would review anyone else's resume.
Okay.
Yeah, so getting into it, I generally don't read blocks like this because that would just take too much time. So I'm just looking, okay, you have your education section, which is fine. I generally don't really read into these since I'm not a recruiter. So I'm assuming that these skills and methods are catered towards that role. And whether or not you actually have those skills is not really my concern from my perspective at this level. Okay, so looking at the experiences, this is pretty clear to read. I noticed you have the sort of the title and then the actual position, where it is, the time, and the type of role it is. From here, I'm really just looking for a quick sentence of what it is, and if you've got it, sort of the impact, outcome, or result